Okay, good afternoon. Welcome to our weekly family connections. Today we are going to be chatting with our elementary principals. We have Katie Cade, our principal of our intermediate, and Kanita Rhodes. She is our principal of our primary school. And we also have Valerie Morris with us. She's our public information officer. I'm Rachel McLean, assistant superintendent. And so we are going to just chat about some options for our elementary students as we go into spring. Spring historically is a time that we're always serious, but we really get kind of intense getting ready for the end of the school year. And so we just want to talk through some options with our principals about how parents can support their children, especially this school year, in light of all the challenges that we have experienced, our families have experienced with COVID. So we'll just start. We've had some questions submitted. And then as always, if you have questions as we're going through, please pop those into the chat or the Q&A feature, and we will try to answer as many of those questions live as possible. So we'll start with Katie. Now that we're in the spring semester, Katie, what changes, if anything, with the instructional plans for the campuses?
As far as I wouldn't say we're changing anything. We're ramping up. I mean, we have the STAR test coming, and we just took our middle of year MAP testing, and so those teachers are using that data that we got back from that test, and they are working with your kids on what they need individually in the classroom. We also have our interim assessments, which are kind of our practice STAR test, coming up early March. And so the teachers are going to use that data as well to really focus in on the kids' gaps and what they need. We've asked a lot of kids to come to tutorials, so we would still love for them to continue that. Coming to tutorials, we're also working with them here during the regular school day. So we're not really changing anything, just adjusting and targeting what we need to target to get ready for that end of year assessment.
Kanita, I think you popped off on us. We're talking about if changes during the spring semester, if anything, that might happen for the instructional plans.
No, our instructional plan is the same. Teachers, though, are now having their parent conferences where they are giving parents specific information as to where the students are at this point and some guidelines that they can use to help them at home, moving closer to the to the end of the school year. And so if they haven't heard from the teacher yet, they will be soon. Those need to be wrapping up within the next couple of weeks. And as far as third grade is concerned, we have tutorials going on or moving forward and getting closer to the STAR test. And so those teachers are looking at all their assessment data, and those students as well should have some goals, and so parents should know exactly what those students are working on and what they need to work on to help get them to that next level.
So what have you guys seen as the impact of COVID on our elementary students this year?
So I think, well, besides the fact that the students are a little further behind, I think the positive impact has been that they're now almost ready for anything. When we had the bad weather days last year, it seemed almost seamless. Even though there were internet problems, it was almost seamless that the students were getting their work done, which parents know the struggles that we've had, from the beginning with that. And so I think it's prepared not only the students for different situations, but all of us, and just to help continue learning and growing regardless of whatever situation comes up. There are some gaps that arise. That happens just in the summertime, in a 2-month summertime with elementary kids. But teachers are being very intentional with those, and I know that a lot of parents are helping at home with those gaps, so we can just try to keep them on track.
Katie, what have you noticed?
I think the hardest thing has just been, trying to do that social distancing at school and not getting to do a lot of the fun stuff that kids really enjoy at school. We've tried to do our best to make it safe and engaging for the kids, and so that's been an adjustment. We do have some gaps to fill, but it's like Miss Rhodes mentioned, our kids have really, and I really saw it personally with my own child this last closure. He really just slid right into that virtual instruction really easily at home. And so that has been a great learning experience for everyone. I think the issues come in where kids are having to miss and maybe not doing that virtual piece. And so we are having gaps created that way. And so if they're not able to get on and do their work while they're out quarantined or for whatever reason, that has been an issue. But for the kids that have been able to go home and continue the virtual, it's a lot more seamless.
Right. TEA released some data reports, I guess about a month ago or so, that shows that our students statewide, not just Snyder students statewide, are coming back in from the beginning of the school year 5.7 months behind where they would have been, this time in a normal non-COVID world. I think we're seeing that a little bit more on our math than our reading. Our reading scores are fairly close to where we expect our students to be performing, but our math scores, we're seeing that. So from a math perspective, I know Courtney Boyd is our math coordinator, and she's not able to join us today, but from a math perspective, why is that? Why do you guys think we're seeing that?
I think from a lower level perspective, as far as lower grade levels, math is different than reading. Reading is like spaghetti. It's all mixed in together, and so once students kind of get the hang of reading, they can practice that pretty much on their own and still develop as a fairly good reader with some guidance. Math, on the other hand, every assessment is completely different. Although we spiral a lot of things into our math assessments from stuff that the students have learned before, every assessment covers something different in math. And so even though those things build on each other, it's not like reading. It's not as fluid, I guess, as reading is. And so I think that's one of the reasons Katie may have a little bit different perspective from the 4th and 5th grade level.
Yeah, so I think it's like she said, we might have a unit that's a 10-day unit, and if a kid misses that completely, they've lost a big chunk of their instruction. And even though we may be building on that, it's hard to go back because math is constantly moving on, and they're covering different standards, and they're taking tests more frequently. And so if they miss a big chunk of that, it's a harder gap to go back and fill than like it would for reading. So we're seeing the impact of that, especially with students that are, maybe they're on campus, but they have to quarantine and they're not able to access the virtual learning. It makes a big difference.
So, you hear a lot about learning loss. Do you guys think this can really impact our students for years to come? So Nicole McCurdy is our ELAR person with the district, and she's joined us. Nicole, what do you think as far as impact that we can see for years to come with students?
Currently at this moment, I know that we've got that 5.7-month gap, but for some of our kids that were already a year and a half behind on their reading level, this could be more detrimental to them, especially without some intense intervention from not just our teachers and our RTI staff, but even we need our parents to kind of be able to implement some of the habits that we have at primary and intermediate home with children doing some self-selected reading. There's some things that we can do to help build. We definitely would need our summer school program can step in and help a lot of our parents out this year, especially to be able to bring them up and bring this problem forward. But we're looking at possibly a 3-year gap here, a period that's going to take us 3 years to get where we need to be again if we don't get very serious this summer and this next school year, and definitely right now, bringing our kids where they need to be.
So we've had a question pop in to the panelists. What can parents do to catch their student up? So we have a series of questions that we're going to talk about these next few minutes of, um, first of all, how can a parent tell how their student is performing? Does it go beyond what the grades are in Skyward? Like, what should a parent be looking at to know what their students, how their students are performing compared to peers?
So at the primary school, reading for reading, there is a report that will show the parent. And if your teacher has not shared this with you, please let me know, and I will make sure that it gets to you soon. But it is an actual report on your student that shows what your student can do as a reader, what they're working on currently to move forward, and those skills that you can help them with specifically at home and what they're working on at school. If all else fails, just reading, making sure that your kids get in their steps every night, and then reading to them so that they can also hear somebody else, a fluent reader. But those specific power goals that those kids are working on will help with those gaps. If they're not reading on grade level, you can get those specifically from the teacher and just be working with them. As far as math goes, I think our map data is probably the best data that we have for math overall for grade level, and comparing them to peers, because our assessments are usually assessed only on specific skills, but the map gives us an overall view for their math. And so having that report from MAP will also help you. It will give you the exact same information for math as for reading. So if you haven't received those from your teacher at the primary school, please reach out to me. And like I said, I will make sure that you have that within the next day or so.
And for the intermediate school, it would we don't have the ERLA report that she was referring to for reading, but we just had our middle of year map, and the teachers, as she said, should have shared those with the parents. If you haven't gotten that, please let us know so we can make sure that you have that, but it'll give you information on your child and kind of where they stand nationally with their peers for each subject. And so that's a great place to look. We also, as I mentioned, we're having our benchmarks coming up in March, and we'll be able to give you kind of an idea of where they would fall end of year STAR test. And so that'll be good data for you as well.
And we know that the STAR test is still going to be administered by the state. The schools are not held, like, they're not going to release an A through F accountability rating for the school. But is it important that our students still take the STAR test, and why? I mean, or why not?
I look at it as a data point for us to use to help your child. If they take it at the end of year, moving into the next year, it gives those teachers that have your child next year a starting point on, okay, where does this kid need help? What did they do well in? And so it's just another way for us to help your child and for you to see kind of where they stand as academically during all of this, because we all know that our kids are a little bit behind where they should be. And so it's just going to give us more information to help your child.
I think too, taking a test like that is not easy. It's a long test. There's a lot of information on the test. And so having a student, we already have fourth graders who have not taken the test yet as third graders. And so I think just keeping them in that habit of taking that assessment, even though it may not mean anything for our school, besides the data that we're going to get, it does help the kids just become more accustomed to that, because there will be other assessments that they have to take in later years, regardless of whether it's STAR or end of course assessments or the ACT or SAT. I think it's good for students to have to be exposed to that.
And what that STAR is measuring is grade level understanding. And so when we see a gap in say, a third grader or a fourth grader that is missing some kind of grade level understanding, then we know that we have some tools, STAR data, MAP, our common assessment data, that we can focus in and support those students. So let's say COVID has impacted us. We know that we're running a little bit behind, but we can use the summer programs like you guys mentioned, next year, some intensive support, and those data points help us to understand this child might be in 5th grade, but we can go back and support that 4th grade understanding also. So what can a parent do? So what are some tools and resources? So we've talked about reading at home, but we have a lot of tools, and now all of our students have devices that are with them. So anything that a parent can do to help support their student at home, even if it wasn't assigned.
So we have lots of programs that your students should be used to accessing through on campus or off campus. Pathblazer being one of them. They go through their Clever account just like they access most of our programs. And it's targeted, it's based on their MAP test, and it specifically assigns each student lessons based on what they need, based on their MAP results. And so that's an easy place for them to go and start working. Also just continuing, like she said, that home reading. We have other programs, Education Galaxy, that the teachers use a lot. There's lots of ways to continue that at home. The biggest thing that I would like to stress is if your kid is not sick, attendance is crucially important. Being here as much as possible. The more they miss, the harder it is to fill those gaps. And if they are on campus, we are able to provide them a whole lot more support, unfortunately, than we can through virtual. We can do a lot more interventions with your kids. So if your child is able to be on campus, I would just ask that they attend school as much as possible, because that's where we can really target them and help fill in those gaps. And then summer school was mentioned as well. If you feel like your kid has some gaps to fill, we would love to have them at summer school this year so that we can work on those things.
I agree with Katie. Attendance is really important. Although our virtual platform is improving and it is very good, at this time, I don't think it is not intended to be their primary learning platform. It is a secondary option that we have, but it shouldn't be just for convenience. You know, we do have students that have to be out because they're quarantined or other medical issues, but just for a convenience because they want to stay home, that's really not a great way to make sure that they stay on track and that we are giving them all the services that they need, that we can give them while they're at school.
So, Kanita, I heard you mentioned about steps, completing reading steps. What is that, and why is that important for our parents to understand?
So the reading process, there's lots of different skills that kids have to learn as they begin to be readers and develop into good readers that can read and understand vocabulary and words that they will start getting into starting in 3rd grade. And so those specific skills are taught by the teacher, and they have activities that help them. But in order for them to practice, they have to read. Just like practicing baseball. I mean, you can't go out and hit a home run unless you spend a lot of time on your swing and, you know, your eye-hand coordination and watching those different pitches and understanding how to hit the ball. And the same is for reading. You have to practice. So we want the student to get not only that independent practice on their level where they are, but to also hear reading of other levels. The teachers in the classroom are reading material that is either at or above grade level to the student, so that they can hear what a fluent reader sounds like, and so that they can learn how to develop those images in their head while they're reading, so they can remember what's happening and understanding why it's happening and what might happen if something else was to go on in the story. And so that development takes place over years. It's not just we learn to read and then that's it. It becomes progressively more difficult as we go along. And so that practice is so important. So they get at least 30 minutes of independent reading practice during school, and then we require them 30 minutes of reading at home. And that could be reading with them, independent reading, or that could be if the parent wants to sit down and read to them and discuss what they've read, that counts also. So we really have to have that practice.
So is it just as important to be reading at the intermediate level? And Nicole, you might want to chime in on this as well. Why is it important to read to our students or have your students read to you?
Well, whenever we read out loud, that's when we're practicing fluency, and fluency leads to comprehension. It's exactly what Miss Rhodes just said. When our students learn fluency, they're learning inflection of voices, how to read with a question, and personality, those things that we like to hear when someone reads to us, even as an adult. When you get on Audible, we choose people that read and sound exciting when they read. That's what our kids learn when they read out loud. They're learning how to figure out and comprehend the text in front of them and to move forward. And it's a really crucial step. They need to hear you read, they need to hear their teacher read, and they need to hear themselves read. That's why we do a lot of that paired activity in the classroom. That's why our teachers do read alouds as much as we can to get the kids completely surrounded by reading. Will help them improve.
Katie, you have anything you want to add?
No, I think they pretty much covered it. I think that when students leave the primary, I'm not sure we are encouraging those steps, even though we don't have the same program that primary runs. We still encourage those 2 steps a day at home, and we reward students for doing that because we want them to read. And to be successful learners, you have to be a good reader, and that's in every subject.
And we've had a question come in from a mom. Will there be a targeted summer school for kids that might be ready to move on to the next grade but are struggling in a particular subject? And we can just talk through some of our summer plans. And then this was a multi-part question. So let's just talk about summer school in general, and then we'll kind of fill in the gaps if we still have questions that haven't been addressed yet. So our summer programs, I'll kind of kick that off. We are going to run it traditionally for the past few years. We've had a summer school that's been mostly for our 5th graders and our 8th graders, and some credit recovery for our high school. But we are going to be running a summer program this summer. It's going to be a half-day program that runs from the end of school, which is June 11th, through the month of July. Yes, it does sound like we're going to be taking up a lot of summer, and we are. We recognize that. But the program is going to be very supportive. We have contracted with an outside technical provider that has been working with our ACE staff and our summer programs principal, and identified some new curriculum. And so if we have students that are behind on grade level in different subjects, we will be inviting those students to attend the summer programs. I just can't stress enough, just like you've heard the principals and Ms. McCurdy talk about, that if we can't get these gaps filled in now, we're going to have students that are struggling for years to come. And that makes students frustrated with school. It makes them not enjoy the learning process. And, it just kind of compounds as it goes each year. And so we want to offer as many options as we can for our students and our families to get those grade level understandings, mostly in math and reading, so that they can continue to build each year without getting so frustrated, if they're behind and they're frustrated. Obviously, during the school year next year, we'll continue with what we call response to intervention, or RTI program, and working with students to continue to fill these holes and identifying those grade level standards that we need to focus on. But summer programs will take up the bulk of the summer. And so that's that's a family decision. You know, we understand family vacations. We understand breaks are super important. We know breaks are important, but it is an option that we are offering out there. Another question is, are we going to be offering any like virtual options for students to use this summer, as far as resources and concepts that students might work on at home, as opposed to like attending a summer program? From the district's perspective, we're just getting started in planning those options and resources that are out there. We did put up a pretty robust summer option program last year that was online for our parents to access. Did we see much success with that? Kanita, Katie, did you guys see much success with our students using the virtual programs in the summer?
Ours was very limited. We didn't have very many students that were that took part in that, and I think the ones that did were we probably didn't track it as well as what we should have at that time. I don't think we had the programs that we have available to actually make sure that the students were doing the things that they needed to do, and that the teachers had been trained on seeing what the reports looked like to see if we were actually making progress. That's kind of how I feel that last summer went. Is we were trying to throw a lot of things together at one time, and everybody was still kind of in shock over everything that had happened since March.
Yeah, I think this year too, having the kids already have on devices and familiar with the programs, whatever we offer, it'll be an easier transition for those students.
I agree. I think provide that parents will have access to those online platforms. And we're trying to design a summer program that has a feel of like a summer camp. And so if you're opting for summer camp options for your children to go to, then you might consider an academic summer camp. That might be an option. The last question that came in is, do you think we should let the kids have a summer and allow kids to be kids? And that's a valid question. I mean, what do you guys think?
I think that we can make that happen. You know, even though we're continuing with some academics, the whole structure and feel of summer school will be a little bit different than a regular academic year. And so the students won't feel like that they're just continuing with school, but it'll be have a little bit different feel. But because the days are so long in the summer, there's still time to go to the pool if it's open and do those sorts of things. You bet. I think kids need to be sick kids, and they need to get outside and they need to do stuff. The problem is a lot of our kids don't do that. They just go home and they stay in front of the TV or in front of the video game all day in the summer, instead of doing those things that allow them to grow in other ways than just academically. So I think we can get the best of both worlds for those kiddos if you and your teacher both, you know, are looking at that summer school is a good option for your student. And it isn't for every kid, really, but it can be beneficial for a large majority of our students.
I would agree with that. And I think, you know, as a parent, we tend in the summer, I like my kids to be able to go outside and play as well. But a lot of the times if I'm working and they're just going to be sitting at home anyways, and I have to come up with activities for them to do. So why not have them come do something educational and more fun? And I know that they're planning some fun field trips and things to make it more of a camp and engaging feel that's just not like normal school. So it's a great option, especially if you're a working parent and you're not able to provide those activities at home.
And again, to piggyback on what Miss Kate and what Miss Rose said, the program that we're talking about this summer is going to have some STEM time built into it. We're going to have recess. We're going to have some PE type things going on. We have field trips that we're trying to do. So it's going to be completely different.
Okay, well, that is our time. I know that Valerie has popped into the chat the link to our previous family connections. And so you'll have a lot of resources there. Please feel free to check those out. We'll be back at 5 o'clock. We'll be covering some of the same questions, but if we have different attendees. We have different questions that pop into the chat also. So please feel free to join us again. Next week, we will be talking with junior high, basically the same type conversation about spring resources and how to help your students be successful. And so if you have a junior high student, feel free to join us again next week, or we will see you back at 5. Thanks, panelists.